Hello. So in case it wasn't obvious what this video is about, my hit novel, that's right, New York Times bestseller over here, has an upcoming sequel. Starfall will be releasing June 22nd on my birthday as a gift to myself. Before I read you the blurb, I will admit that I left it pretty vague on purpose because it's a bit tricky when it comes to a sequel. If people pick this up without having read the first one, I don't want to spoil what happens in the first one or the end of the first one. So I tried to point out more like what's going on internally in general. You know, it's a bit tricky, okay? So I'm going to read it to you. What would you consider crossing the line for? Spoiler on the first line. After recently resurrected in the aftermath of a tragic event, Jory finds himself grappling with a mysterious necrotic ailment that plagues his revived body. Stolen of everything he once held dear, including his village and closest companion, Matthias, Jory is thrust into a tumultuous meeting with Gymcaster Anya and thief Raven. Yes, so those two are back. As they are forced to confront the consequences of their past deeds, a new companion emerges, stirring conflicting emotions within Jory as he navigates loyalty, friendship, and the enigmatic intentions of this mysterious newcomer. Struggling to unravel the complexities of his own heart, Jory is haunted by tempting thoughts of Matthias through his ancestral sword, Starfall, that make him question everything he knew about duty and balance. I can't see, they put this bar over it. I'm trying to read through it. Jory faces a moral dilemma that could shatter the delicate balance between life and death. That's a very big theme here. Meanwhile, a menacing necromancer threatens neighboring villages with an army of undead beings, setting the stage for a harrowing journey where Jory must confront both external threats and inner turmoil on his path to redemption. You've been given a second chance at life. Don't waste it. I guess you can scratch everything I said about spoilers. I'm so nervous for so many reasons when it comes to this book, okay? On the first one, I sailed ahead with confidence. My outline made sense. Most of it was written from my role-playing campaign already, so I knew what the story was before I even wrote it. And I knew how that one was going to end because I already had an idea for the sequel in my mind. Not like the whole story, but the general concept of this book. I wanted it to be from Jory's point of view. So we had to get here from there. So I knew how it was going to end. And I can't tell you because spoilers. And I know y'all haven't read the book because I have one cell. But there was so much pressure on myself to write through the view of this character. Not only because it was my favorite one, my favorite character, and I wanted it to be perfect, but the story wasn't pre-planned. Cove of Storms was. So then the outline happened. I had a really good idea, very good direction of it. But I ended up having to change a whole lot of stuff, more stuff than what I had to change in the first one. And most of what I'm saying here is already extra in the back, just like the first one. I did my research to see what people wanted to see. So I don't know if you can see it. We have character profiles. I extended a bit on the deities and also the magic system. I even have a little bit of extra information. And I think I mentioned major drafts in the back. I didn't include a glossary this time because I figured it would just be almost exactly the same as the first time, maybe with a few here and there added in. Maybe in hindsight, I could have thrown it in just for extra fun. There aren't any more character sketches either, but they will be on my website because I'm constantly adding to them. And I'm thinking about maybe making some more cute merch in the future. Like for Cove of Storms, I made this enamel pin featuring Matthias's signature weapon, Finality, here. So maybe when I get all the characters sketched out, I could do like some stickers or something. That would be cool, Some of the major drafts that I've done have changed a lot. For instance, the title of the book, Starfall, I knew immediately that's what I wanted it to be called because that's the name of Jory's sword. Because it was known to have been made from a fallen star, which aka iron. When I learned that concept, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Especially back in fantasy times when people were extra superstitious. And iron is already a really well-known weakness to a lot of mythical beings. Fairies, elves, those kind of things. So I thought it really works. The very, very first baby seed of this book was supposed to be about where the sword came from, its origins, who made it. But then we would have to go into his family since it was passed down as an heirloom. But I was like, it didn't really lead to anything. I didn't really want it to be about the sword as much as I wanted it to be about the character anyway. And there wasn't really some conflict there, and it pushed a lot of the characters into the back. But the sword still had to be a vital part of the story because, you know, it's special. Jory's got a special connection to it, right? And because of his little incident, now there's a connection with death because of iron having these magical properties already. And then because of his close encounter with death, should we say, it allows him to get a peek into the other side a little bit more easier than he might want. And that could be trouble for him, for somebody who's all about like duty and honor and balance and things. You know, it's not right to mess with fate. And, you know, he's super religious already on top of that. So all these things are confusing all at once. And the sword, you know, resonates with this mystery. So we got this cool magic sword that can do time/death magic. It doesn't make sense when I say it, but trust me, it makes sense on paper, okay? There's also some things I included in the first one that I left out purposely in the second one because I don't know, they don't need to be that expanded on. I like to keep a narrow scope on things. You know, like the guilds. They still exist, of course. I just don't want it to sound more like a video game. So they took a backseat. We don't have time for side quests. Another challenge was that I knew Anya and Raven had to stay because they were main characters already. But I also have to introduce a new character because as I was reading through the, the general guide of writing your story, you need to introduce a character for your second book. So it became a bit of a challenge because in the first one, it was already a challenge writing 3 people at once and making sure they all had equal screen time, what have you. But now I have the added challenge of writing 4 people at once because I would have Anya, Raven, Jory, and this new character. And I have to make sure they all have equal screen time and get a character arc somewhat of their own. And something else I hope you've noticed too is that I like my humor, okay? So I'll be in a dark fantasy. It's not edgy fantasy. Bad things do happen, but there's still plenty of banter and jokes left in there. And I'm even a bit sad because I wanted to add a couple more jokes in there, but I couldn't find the appropriate room to put them, so I couldn't. But trust me, okay, when inspiration strikes, it strikes. Good thing about characters like Jory is they're kind of like Batman. They're so serious, sometimes you can make fun of them at, you know, their expense. So there's that also. I'm also proud of how I included a healthy dose of horror in here because it deals heavily in concepts of like necromancy. So it left plenty of room for undead playthings and a little bit of violence on top of it. So we got to describe all these great horrors that come, you know, with death, and it's pretty cool, I think. I like when there's a little bit of horror in my fantasy. Another concept that I did struggle to include and I had to eventually leave out was a concept from the first book. There's this mention of a cult that Raven like accidentally joined. He don't really know. He may not or may have been a part of. But I added it in here and then I decided, I don't know, there's just no room to veer off into something like that. So I decided to axe it all together. Another challenge I had was in the first book, Matthias was very much not a fighter. And that was made obvious in how hard he struggled in his battles. It put a fun, creative spin on everything because he wasn't good at combat. He had to come up with more creative ways to get through his fights. But Jory is a fighter. It's almost what he's known for, besides being blonde. So I wanted so much to find the perfect balance between not wanting to make him the perfect stereotype that everybody hates. You know, someone who never gets hit. They're always too good at everything. You know, that's boring. I tried to pay attention and have the battles happen in a way where if he does win, then there are consequences for that. And that you have to remember you have teammates also who very much can't fight. And he's also stubborn and prideful. So surrendering is also a thing. And even also just having equally matched opponents help a lot, you know, like sword versus magic, those type of things. How does he deal with that? So I hope to create some dynamic fight scenes where he wasn't too good that it's still entertaining. And I know I emphasized this so much when it came to the first one, but something else I was really, really set on was pushing the limits when it comes to like social dynamics and morality and things like that. I wanted selfish characters, morally gray, you know, so gray they're almost black. So they made a lot of bad decisions on purpose. I wanted so hard to try and up that in this book, but it kept not matching the characters. And I wanted to push harder than the first book. I don't want to say like power creep, but I just wanted to go further than I did the first one. And I honestly don't think I did a better job at pushing limits in the second one than I did the first one, because I was trying very hard to include a threesome in here. I thought that would be great. But unfortunately, it didn't seem in the cards. Okay, mostly because this new character, he would mess everything up. And this new character is here to push Jory out of his comfort zone. That is his main goal in the story. The romance was very controlled, and the undertones were very obvious in the first one. The second one is more about Jory's internal struggle with tradition, sexuality, freedom, these things that Matthias already had, and Jory was always denied because of his responsibility. It's easy for someone to just turn away and say, oh, I don't want to deal with that. But I hope the introduction of this new character kind of forces him and does his job well enough to where Jory can be at peace with himself when he's forced to deal with these things. Now let's talk about endings, okay? It seems to me, I hate the end of every book. I don't know if it's just because I don't want it to end, but I hate happy endings, okay? And I'm not 100% happy with how this one ended, but I honestly can't imagine it happening any other way. Like, the way that happens has to happen. And I don't want to spoil it too much, okay? But it's like you could do something once, and it's like, okay, it's a trope, it's a shock, whatever. But then when you do it twice, I like to be a bit less direct and less fan servicey when it comes to these things. But I think in the end, it's an appropriate ending. Now let's talk about beta readers. This one bothers me a bit because the first one had a few beta readers. And while they were useful in pointing out small details, I didn't really need to change anything big about it. Okay? And I couldn't have any for the sequel, because a problem was that most of the beta readers wouldn't have read the first one before reading the sequel. So how would they go about reading it? I don't understand that. I even tried to look it up, and people said, oh, well, just try to get the same beta readers, but that's not always possible. So what do you do if you don't have the same beta readers? I can't just throw a sequel, and then I can't say, here, read this one and the first one. That's more work than they sign up for. I also worry about offending the wrong people. Even though I put tons of warnings in the front of the first book, I didn't do that in the second book. There were no trigger warnings or whatever. I figured when it said dark fantasy, you're prepared for something dark. But the first one, I didn't feel like I could ever market it properly, because even though it does say dark fantasy, there are some things in there that I could feel could offend the wrong people if they read it and not know what they're getting into. And then yet having no reviews on the book, one bad one could make or break it for me. So I've only very recently started reaching out to people, to try and get them to read it. I had to go through and publish this book without any beta readers. Which also brings me to my next topic. If you're interested in reading Cove of Storms seriously for a review, I'm completely open to that. Just message me or let me know some way, I'm still selling the copy of on Pango with the pin included also, so you can get author copies from me. And I might even sign it, but I will offer just free copies of the book for a review if you want to beta read it. Even though it's already published, I just want you to know what you're getting into. Make sure it's the right audience, because some people will be very upset with Matthias's choices in the first one. And remember, it's just a story. Bad choices make for good drama, okay? And despite that, I still love and adore these books I've written. These characters are very special to me, and I thoroughly enjoy playing God. So that's all. Like I said, if you're interested, upcoming sequel Starfall releases June 22nd. And the first book, Cove of Storms, is available for a sale price. You can get it on Pango from me. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it cheap ebook. Or you can just ask me directly if you want to try and review it for me. And yes, I did listen. These books look a lot thicker than what they are. Okay, they're only about 93,000 words a piece. But I made sure the font was big enough to where people could see it. Starfall was about half its size on top of that. But I also asked a few people, and everybody said they wanted me to up the font to match the first one. So that's what I did. I made sure when I upped the font to make it big enough to see, it became almost twice as big. So it's not as big as it looks. People just prefer the larger font. And I can see it. I can understand that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you again for listening to me rattle about these books I've made. And I don't care. I don't care if anybody reads them or not. I love these characters. The world is so special to me. If you're writing a book, I wish you the best of luck too with it. Until next time, I'll put the links and such. Take care, you guys.